Is Excel 2016, Module 7, Part 12. In this particular segment, we are going to be looking at recording our second macro, which is the transfer macro, using relative references. So instead of an absolute reference, which is what we have been doing, we can use relative references. So for example, if I told a macro to click in cell A1, that is an absolute an absolute reference. It's always going to click in A1. However, if I use relative references button, and then I can use my arrow keys. So if I was in this cell and I clicked use relative references and then I hit the down arrow, it's always going to go one cell down from where I am, not necessarily to A2. So let's see how that works. So we are going to be in our winter macro enabled workbook. We should have already inserted the developer tab. And if you've followed along with earlier parts to this module, you would have other macros already created. Okay, so we're going to create a new macro and we're going to click record the macro. We're going to call this one transfer data, and it has a control T. It's going to be stored in this workbook, and it is going to have a description of created 12/1/2017, and it tells us we are copying copy values in the transfer area, in the receipt worksheet, to the registration data worksheet. And I'm going to put in here uses relative references. All right, so we're going to begin by going to our receipt worksheet and scrolling down, selecting, so click on receipt, then select A40 through F40, and we're going to go to the Home tab and click Copy. Next, we're going to go over to the registration data worksheet. We're going to click in cell A1 and hit Control and the down arrow. That should take us to the last row. Now the next thing we have to do is we have to turn relative references on. So we're going to go back to our developer tab and we're going to say use relative references. Then you want to hit the down arrow. So that says when I go to the end of my data, I want to take and go one row down. So it's relative. It's not always going to be A6. It's going to be one row beneath where I am. Then we're going to turn relative references off. And then we're going to go back to the Home tab, choose our paste arrow, and paste values. Next, we're going to go back to the receipt, and we're going to go all the way back to the top, and A1 is our active cell. Then go back to our developer tab and stop the recording. So let's see what happens if we try to run this macro again. So I'm going to change this person, and they are now in grade 6. And they need a small shirt. Now let's go ahead and run the macro. It's this transfer data, and click run. And you can see that it added the information again in the next row down. So let's go back to receipt, and let's change the data one more time. We're going to make this Christina, and she's doing modern manners, and she's going to be grade 4 and a size extra small. And this time we are going to run the macro using the keystrokes, which was a Control T. And if we go back over it, you can see that it did add it at the bottom again. So that's how the relative references can work in our macros. So we're going to go ahead and save our file. We can click just save this time since it is already saved as a macro-enabled workbook.